By way of introduction, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Auditis, and I'm the General Manager of Strategic Innovation and Enterprise at the Australian Institute of Architects. Thank you for joining us for today's Lean In. I'm really looking forward to it because Jeff Marsden of Bondor has been telling us and our team about the CodeMark certification scheme, and I've learned a bit, but I'm looking forward to learning some more. Today we have Homira Ariampad, who's from Bondor, Mitenko. And as you will all know, Bondor are a national corporate partner of the Institute. And I think that they're actually a little bit more than that. They're a friend in the profession, and they work closely with our team and our members to help solve real problems. So we learn a lot from the team and have a really great, I think, collaborative relationship, which I quite enjoy. I'm going to introduce you to her, Homira now, and her role is National Technical Services Manager. So I don't like to do traditional introductions that we discussed before. I think it's nicer to ask a couple of questions and get to know one another rather than read out a bio. So Homira, how long have you been with Bondor?
Hi, Alexia and everyone. Yes, I've been with Bondor for about 10 years or so.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And you've always kept the same role?
Yeah, mostly. I've done a few project management projects or a few project management roles, but mostly tech services.
Great. And tell us a little bit about your day-to-day and where you're based.
The head office for Bondor Techno is based in Queensland, so that's where we work from. And the day-to-day, it changes every day, but we do a lot of testing, product development, and technical support.
Great. And what's your favourite part about working for the company? Jeff's on the line here. So.
Oh, okay, sure. My manager. No, I think the testing definitely, because it sort of helps you understand the product a lot better, and it helps you with the with the projects and to help customers as well. So testing is definitely the best.
Yeah, I can understand that. You have a very unique vantage point, and I guess that would be very interesting. The things that you see in your day-to-day, many people would see in their careers. So
yeah, no, it's quite interesting. Yeah.
All right. Well, everyone, as mentioned before, while the presentation is going, please put your question into the chat box, and I'm going to hand over now for the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Alexia. Okay, well, on behalf of Bondor Techno, I would like to welcome you all to the presentation today. As mentioned, my name is Homira Ariampad. I'm the National Technical Manager for Bondor Techno Group. And I'd like to go through the CodeMark scheme in general and how it can be used to simplify the compliance process under the new provision in NCC 2019. In today's presentation, we'll first have a look at CodeMark, what it is and how you can obtain it and some of the benefits. We will then have a look at a CodeMark certificate in detail to get a better understanding of what to look for and when to find it, where to find it. And then we will have a look at A2.24. And we will have a look at how CodeMark can be used to simplify the process in relation to performance-based design brief. So firstly, CodeMark certificate. What is CodeMark certification? CodeMark is a voluntary third-party certification scheme that authorises the use of new and innovative products to facilitate compliance. So a few key words there. It's voluntary, not every product has one, and it's third party, which brings in that element of independent verification that provides assurance and peace of mind. So it provides confidence and certainty to regulatory authorities and the market. and it is one of the several options available for meeting evidence of suitability requirements of the BCA. However, unlike other evidence of suitability options, certificate of conformity receives mandatory acceptance under the state and territory building control legislations. So these are the words that I've got here are directly from CodeMark Australia's scheme rules, which is owned by the Commonwealth of Australia. I've put a link to the website, to ABCB's website, where this information can be downloaded, as well as other information on CodeMark. So what are the benefits of CodeMark? Firstly, as mentioned before, increased consumer confidence, guaranteed legislative acceptance by the authorities. It's not just another evidence of suitability, it encompasses all the other evidences of suitability. It's a time-saving consent and inspection process for projects. As we go through this presentation, it'll become evident how it'll help save time. And it's a clear demonstration that the product meets mandatory compliant requirements as long as, so that's the key here, as long as the product is used in accordance with the use and limitations defined on the certificate. Just because I've got a CodeMark certificate for a particular product doesn't mean that I can install it on any project. It needs to be used within those limitations. And I might point out here that some people are critical of CodeMark scheme, perhaps because they haven't caught up with the latest changes. The scheme has come a long way since it was first introduced. The earlier versions didn't include anywhere near as much information that it does now, and the process now involves a lot more rigor than originally. So who are the main users of CodeMark? Obviously authorities and building certifiers when they're assessing the compliance of building compliance with the BCA. Designers and specifiers such as yourselves. If you want to have a smoother certification process, you choose products that are obviously suitable to be used for your application and are backed up by CodeMark certification scheme. Builders and building owners when selecting products, and of course trade suppliers to promote use of products. So why choose CodeMark? CodeMark is the most stringent form of evidence of suitability under the BCA. It is the most stringent because, as mentioned before, it encompasses all the other forms of evidence of suitability, and it has been reviewed by qualified third-party professionals independently. So here, the picture on the screen is directly from ABCB's handbook of evidence of suitability, and it shows us the evidence of suitability framework. If we start down the bottom, it basically gives you a list of all the documents that can be used as an evidence of suitability. So if you start down the bottom, we can see product technical statement, we can see reports by an engineer or reports from an accredited lab, all the way to the top with CodeMark certification scheme. So to obtain CodeMark, the manufacturer must produce all of those evidences that you can see. So they all come under the umbrella of CodeMark. Now, the process, we're actually going to refer to this process a little bit later on in the presentation. So I hope you can pay a little bit more attention to the steps on this slide so that you can recall it next time I mention it. So the process for obtaining CodeMark is firstly to define the scope of use for the product. So once you know where the product can be used, then you can identify the relevant BCA provisions that the certificate needs to cover. And from there, the manufacturer will have to produce the technical information, specifications, product test results, and any independent assessments or appraisals. So all of that are issued to the certifying body, who will independently review them and ensure that they can be used to meet those relevant BCA provisions that were defined. Why choose CodeMark? Continued, I guess. It's not just the initial process of obtaining CodeMark. There's actually a lot more involved to maintain the certificate as well. The manufacturing facility is subject to annual audits. The critical components are identified and their suppliers are subject to annual audit as well. The construction sites might be audited, and the certificate and all the documentation are audited every year as well. They're audited for any changes to the standards, to regulations, and also looking for any report that might have expired since the last audit. The manufacturer also need to declare a list of their suppliers, and they need to provide declaration that the product that they produced today is the same as the product that was used for the initial testing. And of course, the whole scheme is administered by ABCB and JASANS, and the certifying bodies themselves are actually audited as well by JASANS every year to make sure that they follow their strict procedures. Well, now that we've got a better understanding of what CodeMark is and the process involved, let's have a look at a sample certificate. But before we do that, I just wanted to take this opportunity to point out that at Bondorma Techno, we have 13 CodeMark certificates for our products, and we're currently working on obtaining a few more certificates for a few other products. And we're proud to say that we were the first in our industry to obtain CodeMark for our products, and we've had our first certificate since 2013 and maintained all of them continuously over the last 8 years. In fact, for more than 7 years, we were the only panel manufacturer in Australia with a CodeMark certificate. We've put a lot of effort and energy into it. And as you can see on the screen, we've opted to get a separate certificate for each product. Perhaps we could have combined some of these to save a bit of money, but I guess at the end of the day, because our main focus in this process was the end user, we wanted to make sure that it is as simple and as straightforward as possible. So when you pick up one of our certificates, you know that all the information that is on that certificate relates to the product that you're interested in. So with that in mind, let's have a look at our a sample certificate that I've selected here, which is for Bondor panel. Each certificate contains different number of pages. This certificate has got 5 pages. And if you start from the top right-hand corner, you can see the certificate number, which is clearly a unique number that is assigned to each certificate, and you can use that number to search for the certificate on various registers. And we go through this a little bit later on as well. Then a little bit further down, you can see the name of the product, Bondor panel, and a little bit of a description about what the product is. Then an important section there, which is the BCA 2019 Amendment 1. You need to check and make sure that the product has been assessed against the current BCA version. Then we have in the middle of the screen, we've got the provisions that the product complies with in terms of volume 1 and volume 2. And as you can see there, we've got performance requirements and deemed to satisfy provisions. So that's important to note that you can use CodeMark both for performance solution as well as deemed to satisfy pathway, depending obviously on what they comply with. Then one of the most important sections of the certificate, which is the limitations and conditions. So the product complies with those provisions as long as it is used within those limitations and conditions that are listed here. And then down the bottom of the page, you've got the date of the issue and the expiry date, which again are very important. So on the second page, the limitations and conditions continue. And then you've got general information about CodeMark certification in general, the scope of certification and general disclaimers. Then we move on to the third page where Appendix A starts. That's where the technical data is. You start by looking at what the product looks like, what it's made of, and then the technical information such as structural performance. And as you can see there, we've got a link to all our span tables. And then it continues to fire properties. Bondor panel is a group 1 and group 2 product. So that's all mentioned there. Fire hazard properties on the 4th page and energy efficiency information. As you can see, we've got the lambda at 23 degrees and R values at 23 degrees as well as the total R values for winter and summer conditions, 15 and 30 degrees. And we've also included 6 degrees there as well, because in a lot of cases, Bondor panel is used for cold room applications where 6 degrees is probably more relevant. Then we've got the weatherproofing information, and followed on to the last page, acoustic properties, and then Appendix B, which contains the evaluation statement. So B1 gives you the assessment methods that we use. So basically, if you remember the evidence of suitability, we had reports from an engineer, or reports from an accredited lab. So these are the different assessment methods that we've used. And then B2 lists the actual test reports. And here's a list of all our certificates and the different clauses of NCC that they comply with. For each of those ticks that you see on the screen, we've had to do a lot of testing, a lot of independent verification and certifications to be able to obtain that. Okay, well, now that we have covered off CodeMark, let's have a look at one particular application that CodeMark can be really useful in. As I mentioned before, clearly the use of CodeMark is not just limited to A2.2. You can actually use it for the deemed to satisfy provisions as well. In any case, let's have a look at A2.24, and then we'll go through how CodeMark can be used to simplify that process. Just a little bit of background. NCC 2019 was obviously released in 2019, which is the current one, and Amendment 1 came out in July 2020. And A2.24, which you can see on the screen, was introduced as part of Amendment 1, which came out in 2020. However, there's a note on the screen at the bottom of the page. As you can see, there was a note to say that this doesn't take effect until 1st of July 2021. So until recently, the development of performance solution was largely unregulated. And other than fire safety design, there was really not a lot of guidance material to help practitioners understand the importance of performance solution process. And there's obviously varying degrees of complexity and stakeholder engagement in A2.24, depending on the project and the element of the design that is under consideration. So I just wanted to point out that for the purpose of this presentation, I'm really going to oversimplify this process. And perhaps I'm going to go through these steps, I'm going to focus more on a performance solution that might be related to use of a panel in a particular project, if you like. And as I'm doing this, I want you to try and remember the CodeMark process that we discussed a little bit later on, earlier, and look for similarities in the approach here. So with that in mind, let's look at the steps in A2.24. As the first step, we need to prepare a performance-based design brief. That is done in consultation with all the stakeholders. They need to establish the technical requirements, compliance benchmark, and acceptance criteria. And they also need to decide what assessment methods is going to be used to show compliance. As you know, there are a few different assessment methods. Evidence of suitability that we mentioned before is one of them. There's verification methods, expert judgments, or comparison with DTS provisions as well. So once you know what the provisions are and how you're going to do your assessment, you go into the analysis step. The work can actually get quite involved in the analysis step, depending on what aspect of the design is being analysed and what assessment method is going to be used. But if we go back to my simple example of an insulated panel used as a cladding, and let's say we decided that we're going to use evidence of suitability as our assessment method. So in that case, the analysis would involve gathering all the technical information about the product to find out the nature of the product and how it would perform under certain conditions. And once we've got all the information, then we move on to the evaluation step. And during the evaluation process, all of those design documents that have been collected need to be evaluated and assessed against the criteria that was defined during the performance-based design brief. So these two steps, there might be a few iterations going through these two steps. If you evaluate the information and decide that you don't meet the performance requirements, then you might have to go back and carry out the analysis again. And as part of that, you might come up with some conditions and limitations to make the product work. And all of that needs to be documented. So once you satisfy yourself that, yes, the performance requirements are met, then you prepare the final report. And the final report is basically a summary of everything that you went through, summary of all the steps. These are the provisions, these are the documents that I've used, these are the limitations, and this is how it was evaluated, and hence we meet the performance requirements. So ABCB has published an article and a short video on this topic, and that explains how this whole process can be simplified by using products that have CodeMark certificate. I've put a link to both the article and the video here on the screen that you can go and have a look at, which provides a lot more information. But we'll go through this briefly right now. So the first step was to prepare a performance-based design brief. Now, if you're using a product that has a CodeMark certificate, that step more or less remains the same. You still need to sit down with all the stakeholders and define all the relevant MCC provisions. And when you're noting what assessment method you're using, you note that you're going to use a CodeMark certificate to demonstrate compliance. Then where it gets really simple is in steps 2 and 3, analysis and evaluation. The conformity body who issued the CodeMark certificate has already undertaken the analysis. So all the work has been done already. So all you need to do as part of the analysis is to make sure that the product is used within those limitations and conditions that are on the CodeMark certificate. As long as you use it within those conditions, then you get a tick for analysis and you can move on to the next step, which is evaluating the result. And this one is even simpler. All you need to do, if you remember, there was the CodeMark certificate number on the top right-hand corner of this of the certificate, of the first page of the certificate. You basically take that one and go to Jazz Answers website, they have the CodeMark registered there. You put the CodeMark number there and make sure that the CodeMark is valid and it can be relied on. So if it is valid, then you get a tick for this step as well. And the final report is again a summary of all the steps. These are the performance requirements. I've used CodeMark certificate. I'm using the product within the limitations and conditions. The CodeMark certificate is valid and hence the performance requirements have been met. So that's a lot simpler for products that have a certificate. So as a summary, CodeMark is the most stringent form of evidence of suitability under the NCC. It receives mandatory acceptance under a state and territory building control legislation. It provides confidence and certainty to authorities and to the market. And when relying on a CodeMark certificate, the analysis should ensure that the proposed use of the product falls within the limitations outlined in the certificate. And finally, the CodeMark certificate assists by simplifying the process of performance solution under A2.24. I hope you found this presentation informative and thank you for your attention. We have a lot more information on our website on CodeMark, including our CodeMark certificates and a white paper that you can download. And please feel free to contact your local Bondo or Techno representative with any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that great presentation. I really appreciate it. All right, I've popped in the first question, something that came up as you were talking. I'm interested to know how the manufacturing facilities are audited.
Yeah, that's a good question. We actually have several facilities around Australia in all the states. In some of the states, we've actually got multiple facilities. So depending on the product that they produce, some of these facilities must be audited every year, and some of them are subject to audits randomly. They're picked randomly every few years, every 2 or 3 years, and the things that they look for, obviously, is to ensure that all of the quality procedures are followed, to ensure that things such as testing, traceability of the products, quality control, raw materials, and to ensure that both our raw materials and the end products comply with the relevant standards.
Thank you so much. I've got a question that's come through from Troy Diamond. Good surname. I like that. And another one from Eve. So let's ask Troy's first, and then we'll move on to Eve's. How is performance solution process affected by the Design and Building Practitioners Act in New South Wales? Then it continues. For alternative solutions, I presume we will still require facade engineers for Class 2 buildings. How is CodeMark affected by the DBP Act?
Well, I'm not sure if CodeMark was actually affected by that act, because basically that's a registration of the professionals. So I would say it doesn't really affect CodeMark. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Thank you for the question, Troy. I really appreciate it. Now we're going to move on to Eve's question. How often do you need to get a CodeMark certificate for your product? Oh, this is a good question. Is it annual?
Yeah, that's right. Well, I mean, the initial process is to provide all of that information to get your initial certificate, and then every year you go through that audit process to make sure everything is up to date, and they check it with the latest standards, latest NCC provisions, and obviously they're up to date with all of those changes. And if anything's affected, they would update the certificate accordingly.
Thank you. Okay. Oh, there's lots of questions coming through. I've just got to rewind a little bit. So 1 sec. Now, the next question is from Jim. Thank you, Jim. The question is, do you know who audits CodeMark and or who owned it? Good question.
Yeah, very good question. The scheme, the owner of the scheme is the Commonwealth of Australia, and they have appointed JASANS as the scheme administrator and the accreditation body. So JASANS has two functions. As the accreditation body, they accredit the certification bodies, and we'll go through that in a second. And as administrator, they manage the administration of the scheme in accordance with the rules. So, so you've got the Commonwealth at the top, and then you've got JASANS under that, and then the certification bodies who are accredited by JASANS, that, as mentioned in my presentation, they get audited every year as well.
Great. Thank you so much. All right. Now, the next question we have is from Mark. How does a specifier verify the authenticity of a CodeMark certificate?
Yeah, very good question. The best way of doing that is by checking JASANS's register. That's where you can either search for, if you've got the CodeMark number, you can put that number in there and search for it. If you haven't got the CodeMark number and you know just the name of the manufacturer or the company who's claiming that, you can search for them as well. So you can search both ways to find the certificate that you're looking for, and you can download it from there as well with all the information.
Thank you. Now, Walton A. I'm going to assume Walton is a surname, so sorry that we don't have your first name, but I'm just looking at the username in the account here. So the question is, if CodeMark is the most stringent evidence of suitability, why do we still get asked by building surveyors for individual certificates?
Very good question. I guess as part of their due diligence, if you like, they need to do their work, and probably you know, the best way of I guess resolving this is to direct them to the manufacturer, and there's, in most cases that we've sort of dealt with, we've found that there's been a little bit of clarification required. If we talk to them direct, in most cases we point them to the right section of the code to find the information they're looking for, and in most cases it can be resolved. So the best way is to point them to the manufacturer. So I guess they're trying to do their job as well.
Why isn't CodeMark compulsory for all products? Thank you, Eve.
Well, I don't know. I guess you need to go and ask the Commonwealth. It is, as specified in the scheme rules, it is voluntary. So I don't know why they made it voluntary. I guess there's a lot of work involved in obtaining CodeMark. So like anything else, if you want to make it compulsory to begin with, there's going to probably be a lot of resistance. So perhaps that's one of the reasons.
Yeah, I think that the people that are creating policy do try and use the carrot and stick initially, and to get a large amount of people on board before they make things compulsory, just for exactly the point that you've just made. Gets a better outcome with less worry in between. And congratulations and well done to yourself and your team and your company for all of the work. Given how stringent this is, I understand it would be a lot of work for you to be involved in this certification and be certified. So well done.
Thank you.
It's all right. Thank you, Stephen. If a product does not have CodeMark, what do you do next? Good question.
As mentioned, you'd probably have to get all of those test reports. If you want to use a product and you need to meet a certain requirement under the NCC, you can use other evidence of suitability. It doesn't have to be CodeMark. It's just that CodeMark is the most stringent one. But the problem is, if you use other reports, let's say you get a test report, you need to do all the work there. As you know, there are so many Australian standards out there. So we're not expected to know and understand how to read and interpret those standards. So it's best to leave it to the experts, and that's why we promote use of CodeMark. But unfortunately, if there is no CodeMark, then you'd probably have to ask for those, you will have to ask for the other evidence of suitability, and you'll have to go through and make sure you understand the test reports, make sure you understand that they're actually relevant, and you need to be able to interpret the test results and interpret it against the provisions in NCC, which is, I guess as architects or as even as engineers, we shouldn't be expected to know and understand how to interpret every test report that is out there. So that's really the only alternative we've got.
Thank you. Appreciate that. How can we have confidence in CodeMark following the problems of the ACP external cladding?
Sure, that's a good question.
Yes.
I guess like any other system or process, when it's first introduced, it goes through a few bumps and hurdles. But I guess, at Bondorma Tecma, we've always believed in CodeMark scheme because we know how complicated it can get out there with all of these information and misinformation. We believe that it's the best way of promoting products that comply with the standards, and that's why we've persisted with it over the last 8 years. And as mentioned in my presentation, it has come a long way since it was first introduced. I remember the very first versions, they only had like the different provisions that they comply with without any notes and limitations and conditions. And they used to be very brief, 1 or 2 pages, and now it gets to 5 or 6 pages. So there's a lot more information, and it's been tightened up a lot.
Thank you so much, Amira, for your presentation. Thanks. I really appreciate it. And maybe one day we can have you back again and you can tell us more about some of your testing and things that you do more broadly. That'd be fantastic. Now, we're looking to see if we can get the team from Bondor to repeat the fantastic session they did last year about the NCC changes. We had over, I think, 650. Jeff, you might want to unmute yourself. You might remember the number, but it was a very large amount of people that were coming. So we thought that's a really relevant thing still. We're going to see if we can repeat that session in a couple of weeks' time. And thank you, everyone. Enjoy your afternoon. Thank you again for a great presentation, Amira. And see you all at the next Lean In. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.